Welcome back to Grazeland. Today we are doing something I really didn't want to do. This giant beautiful tree is dying, so it's a danger to the vehicles and to the house, so unfortunately it has to come down. Now, an interesting story about this tree: if you look, the very center trunk is the trunk we are knocking down first, and that trunk is completely dead. It had like these really long-tailed wasp looking things that burrow and put their eggs in dead wood, and so there's a bunch of holes at the bottom of this trunk. But the previous owner was talking to me about this, and he was telling me how he had this ingenious idea that he was going to make a tree house out of that center trunk, even though it's dead. So I'm not sure how that would have worked out for him. Probably not very good. Makes sense with the logic of all the other projects that were done in this house. So I cut a notch in it, and I'm still learning as I go. We all got to be pinching pennies and learning how to do stuff nowadays on our own, because hiring pros is expensive. And I didn't cut the notch deep enough. Part of it was because of how rotted the trunk was. I was afraid of total collapse. My biggest fear was it falling on the house. After it finally fell, though, I realized that it was so rotted that it was pretty light wood. At least the center trunk was. I was still unaware of how heavy or light all the side trunks were. But you could see it just pushed over, and I didn't think it through it for catching all the branches. But I just got this heavy-duty tow rope, and it's not going to take much energy to pull it down because, like I said, most of this tree was already dead, so every branch holding it is like a dead branch. Quick little tug, and it's going to come down. Now this wood is already primed and ready to go for firewood, which was nice, and it burned pretty fast though because it was so rotted. And I want to put a disclaimer now. Look how efficient the chainsaw is working. Granted, it's fast forwarding, but I do typically have a sharp blade. I just don't have it sharpened all the time because, like I said, I don't typically have a sharp blade all the time. It's 50-50 if it's a sharp blade. It's much faster if you keep your blade sharp all the time. Also, on a side note, if you're a part of the government that made all these dumb laws for all the gas cans where we have to dance around the can to get the gas to come out, you need to find a different career path. It ain't for you. I spilt more gas with those stupid safety pours than I ever did with a normal spout. And yes, you can get alternative old-fashioned spouts on Amazon. Now we have part 2, the next trunk of the tree, and this is the first trunk of the tree that was kind of alive still, but still dying. And so it was a little bit more concerning. So I started off with the branch that goes furthest from the house and it's leaning away from the house to take the safest approach and get a feel for the tree. Part of the reason I bought the house is because it had a very mature area for trees. Unfortunately, I wasn't looking at the details of the health of the tree. You can see that center post I already chopped down earlier. That one was completely rotted, and these ones are on their way out. So I start off by making my notch in the direction I want the branch to fall, and I realize my chain is really dull, but I hate sharpening chains because it takes so long. So I just spend 3 times longer trying to get through the tree. If I had to go back again, I feel like I would buy a steel chainsaw, but I've actually never used a steel chainsaw, so I don't know if it's actually better, but the videos I see, they seem to do a better job, but maybe they just sharpen their chain better than, or more frequently than I do. Maybe better too. So typically you go almost halfway in, I understand, with the knot from the videos I've seen and the trees I've already knocked over before. But because of such a dramatic slant that this had, I didn't think the notch had to go very far into the tree. You can see at this point, I do believe this is after I sharpen the chain. That's why you see wood chips flying out a little bit faster now. Another problem is this type of tree has shallow roots, or it's because of the terrain. It's a very rocky terrain. So the roots are actually pulling up the sidewalk as well and cracking the sidewalk. and it's because it has shallow roots. I don't know how strong they would be in a really strong windstorm. We're just finishing the final touch on this, trying to make sure it's as straight in the direction I want it to go as possible, and evenly cut on both sides. Suppose that was about halfway up the trunk. Oh well, so now you do the back cut, nice straight line, then you don't go all the way, you would leave a little portion of it. If a tree falls in a forest, do you still hear it? I did recycle the wood. I used it as a firewood in the garage to keep the garage warm. Now over here, this was 3 or 4 of the trees. You can see a lot of these trees, they were planted way too close to each other, and so they're very crowded, and several of them were leaning over onto the neighbor's house. And I am not about to take a chance when it comes to someone else's property. I don't want to be that kind of a neighbor. So I did hire a professional company to remove the trees that were in danger of falling on their house, which the previous owner should have done if they cared. But from all the other projects I've done in this house, I can tell they definitely didn't care about very much stuff. And also, a fun little fact, this tree right here next to the truck, it's fairly alive in a lot of branches, and unfortunately at a later date, the rest of the tree I just got done cutting, I decided to hire a pro to cut the rest of it because I didn't want it to fall on my own house or vehicles, and it was leaning too hard. I didn't trust it, and unfortunately when they showed up, they started cutting down the tree right next to that red bag that I did not want cut down because it wasn't really endangering anything even if it did fall. So that's unfortunate, but they did a good job cutting down the tree they were supposed to cut down once they did, which we'll look at that as soon as we're done with them chopping up this one. And part of the deal to keep the prices low and to recycle the wood, I told them I would leave the lumber, and even told them to leave the wood chips, but they actually took the wood chips, but then came back at a later date and dumped a whole bunch of wood chips from other projects that they had. But they left the logs to make the price cheaper and to give me firewood again for the garage, to keep the garage warm. Now eventually I want this whole front yard to be fenced in, and I want to remove that sidewalk right there. And this is so the chickens are going to have access to the front yard and the backyard. And I'll make sure the fence goes around the sidewalk so delivery doesn't have to go through the fence to deliver packages or anything like that, so you don't have to worry about the dogs or chickens getting out. This company did a good job, and they offered me a good rate, and for the most part they were pretty professional. So for the trees that were leaning over the neighbor's house, I have no regrets on hiring them to do that. I wouldn't want to take the risk. But the tree right to the left that you can see in the top corner peeking out of this camera view, that was the one I chainsawed at the beginning of the video. That one I kind of wish I would have just tried the rest of the tree myself, because after they cut it down, they said, because I was worried that the tree would go through the roof, and they said that the tree was pretty rotted, so it might damage shingles, but it would have been light enough to not probably go through the roof. So knowing that, I wish I would have, I already had real thick ropes and straps where I was going to winch the trunks to the tree that they cut down. They weren't supposed to. That is still there right now. And I was just going to chainsaw it like I did all the other ones, but I played it safe, and at the end of the day, I guess you can't complain for playing it safe. Part of my concern was I didn't know if I messed up if insurance would cover the damages. So then here you can see right here, I'll put an arrow. That's where the tree was that they cut down before I woke up, and I didn't realize it, unfortunately, so they cut like 90% of that tree down, which that tree was still mostly healthy. But this tree is like 50% healthy, but you can see like all the top branches are already dying, and there's several large branches even lower that are dying. So for the safety of the house, it had to come down. Now I'm wondering what type of tree should I plant. I do want to get some kind of nut tree growing. because there's also squirrels around here. And I know most people hate squirrels, but I like squirrels, so I kind of want to get a tree that makes nuts so they can have fun cracking open the nuts and burying them and stuff. So I'm in grow zone 4. If you are in that grow zone, you can let me know what type of nut tree you think does good, especially if you live in grow zone 4 too. With their bucket lift, they don't have to worry about climbing a rotted tree to cut it down, so that's pretty clever of them. You can see there's a few other trees on the property that are already slowly hitting that fate of more than half of the branches are dead. Very sad. But I need to start planting trees now to make up for them. And as long as they're not endangering falling on a building, I'm going to leave them as long as I can. So there you have it. That massive shade tree that was nice in the summertime to shade the house from the evening sun is now gone. But I no longer have to worry about waking up to find half the house missing. Thanks for watching Grazeland. If you're enjoying this type of show, hit that subscribe button. And you can see that cat house right there is what I built on the channel. If you haven't seen that yet, go check out the video. Thanks for hanging out and watching my video. I appreciate it, and I hope you have an awesome day.